Okay.
What's happening?
What's going on?
Nothing.
Let me turn off this phone. All right, Brendon Payne.
Off script. You've been gone for a couple weeks.
I've been gone a couple of weeks. Yes,
We missed you.
Huh?
We've missed you.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm back. Good to be back.
Good to have you.
Ready to get back to work.
What are we talking about?
Today's conversation: neutralize the hype.
Yeah. What's that? What's that mean?
So here's what I'm thinking. Right. So lots of talk out there about a shift in market.
Mm-hmm.
So the media, of course, is going to get a hold of that, which they've already have. Okay. And they're going to have some crazy titles, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are going to get people's attention, because that's what media does, right? We're not judging media, but that's what they do. That's their job, right?
Right.
So some of these titles are going to scare the heck out of people. So this is the time to become and be the professional in the industry and actually bring concrete data, bring information, bring certainty back to the consumer, and be able to explain what is really and truly happening in the real estate market right now, not just crazy headlines. Perfect example would be, okay, if you look at foreclosures, I think they're forecasted to be up like 95% this year, right? So you can easily come up with a title, foreclosures are on the rise, they're back, up 95% this year. So if a consumer is not aware of what that really means, what the data means, what the numbers are, and just sees that title, you can imagine what their thoughts are going to be, right? So
yes.
That's great. Yeah.
So, yeah. I was wondering kind of what you were seeing. I mean, I try to limit the amount of stuff that I see, and kind of control it, but I can. So the foreclosure stuff. What other things can you anticipate that you're already seeing? I mean, obviously there's a lot of conversation. We're talking about a shift a lot. And you don't get a lot of chance to go back and explain, or people don't read past the headline. So what other things do you anticipate, or have you already seen that would kind of lead to that hype?
I'm glad you asked that question, right? Because 2 minutes ago, I just Googled real estate news, and these are the top stories that came up. Okay. I'm going to flash them on the screen right now. Here's one. The housing market has peaked. Okay, I'm not going to say which news media said these, right? But these
just hang on, because I know a lot of people think, okay, well, this was all set up. That question wasn't set up. That was honestly a question that I had, like, what are you seeing? I try not to look at this. So you already did this, and these are your headlines. All right,
like right now, literally right before we got on video, I actually Googled it. I said, let me see what pops up, just out of curiosity. And typically this is off script. It's called for a reason off script. We typically don't. Brendon and I don't talk about this. We just come up with a title like 5 minutes before we go on, and there's no agenda. We just go out there and start shooting the breeze, right? But I actually did a search real quick, and these are the top stories that popped up on the first screen. There's one. This is the second one. Now this is a big one. Housing market resembles 2007. That's a bold statement there. Like, I don't know anybody that really thinks that the market right now resembles 2007.
Well, they do.
Well, yeah, except
they do, and you can find 5 other ones that say the exact opposite. This is so different than 2008. Yep. Okay, so keep going.
Here's the next one. Now this is an actually accurate number, but they don't also mention that if you actually continued on with this and you wanted it to like be real data, inventory was down 60% compared to last April.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, yeah, of course, sales are going to be down if there's no homes to sell.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Here's the next one. There are signs that the red hot housing market may be cooling down. And by the way, guys out there listening, watching, please, chime in, give us some input, comment. You like what we're saying, don't like what you're saying, hate us, love us, whatever, agree, disagree, anything. Just would love to make this into a conversation. So red hot housing market may be cooling down. One of the hottest, they're bringing Canada into the mix right now. So housing markets in Canada turn into buyer's market. I mean, that's
fast.
That's fast. Yeah, it doesn't turn into it doesn't go from an extreme seller's market with less than a month's supply of homes all of a sudden to a buyer's market. It doesn't happen that quickly. Okay. And then this one's a long one. This one is one of my favorites. So I saved this one for last. The real estate refresh has arrived. The supply-demand balance of U.S. real estate is starting to shift active listings rose 5%, and the week ending Saturday, the biggest jump, ...
Wow, that's compelling.
Yeah.
I'd click on that.
I mean, I don't blame them, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
what they want. They want clicks. They want people to view it. But you got to think, if you're out there, and you and I talk about this all the time, Greg Harrelson, we talk about this all the time to the agents we coach, the conversations are always changing.
Yep.
Okay, so right now, the conversations with the consumers out there, whether it's buyers or sellers, the conversations are changing. Okay, so you have to know that the consumer that you're talking to may be looking at news articles like this. You and I don't really care about the news. We don't watch it, but there's people out there that do. So you need to be aware and be ready to have these conversations with people and explain what this really means. Okay, from someone that's on the front lines in the industry.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it is understanding that the consumer, this is one topic. Like, this is our lives. From a business standpoint, a good portion of it. A lot of people that are probably listening to this, that's, it's the industry that you're in. So it plays a lot bigger role in your day-to-day life than it does the average consumer. So you're going to do a little bit more digging, you're going to have a little bit more insight, but the consumer lives the real estate industry in little snippets, in little headlines, and they don't dig in to look and say, well, foreclosures are up 95%. Yeah, they're up 95% from non-existent last year. So that's a big difference than going there up 95% from record highs. Those are two completely different realities.
Right.
And I think the other assumption that, or the other reality that you have to be clear on is what the consumer has access to, for the most part, is going to be what sells. And there's never, like, good news never sells newspapers, magazines. The headlines, the negative, the change, the fear, those are what sells. And that's what they typically are going to be served up. So what we're talking is, how do we neutralize that? And I think it starts with us being the, what are we going to do to first be able to understand what's really going on, and then be able to have that conversation that neutralizes it.
Yeah. And we got a couple of comments. Let me just put them out there. So Kirk Starvey says, just because it's a headline doesn't make it true in our market. And that's absolutely right, Kirk. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, but the consumer doesn't know. As Brendon just pointed out, they don't have access to what we have access to. So they're going to see these headlines and they think that that's what the reality is. And this is what we're talking about. You actually, as the agent, as the professional, need to know what these numbers truly mean and be able to explain that.
They don't have the local data.
Yeah. Jason, broad stroke generalities about national stats only confuse the general public. Yeah, which makes agent. I mean, Jason, you're a great agent, one of the best agents I know, and that's what makes you even more valuable in this kind of market. So as the market begins to shift, you're able to have these conversations with people, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. Is how do you, in your market, become the expert, become the calming voice, become the person that's actually going to get people more grounded and get them off the ledge and say, look, this is really what's happening. I know you saw this number, but let me paint the whole picture for you, not just the number that you just saw on the news. Yeah.
Of that. Yeah. And I think the other thing is, there's a big portion, I would guess in most markets, there's a big portion of the agent population that has not been through any shifting market. At least locally here, you'd have to be in the business for 15 plus years to go from a seller's market to shifting out of a seller's market. So the majority of people, no fault of their own, everybody gets in at a different time, but the majority of people haven't experienced something like this. So one of the things I can anticipate in any shift, there is a tendency or there's the opportunity for agents to, instead of neutralizing it, go, maybe I just kind of jump on board with this. Mm-hmm. And instead of going, okay, I've got good information here, let me focus on really what the consumer is wanting. Let me focus on what their motivation is. Let me give them options and then be detached from what they choose. Then there's that tendency to go, you know what? Let me feel out a little bit for what this person thinks so it's going on, and then just like pile on. Like, oh my gosh, yes. It's like, if you listen to 10 conversations, whatever the seller or the buyer said, they were changing their opinion of what was happening with all 10 of them. And one, it's not a great way to build a long-term business because you get found out. Like, people understand if they ask a few questions that you really don't know, you're just kind of going along with what they say. And more importantly, the consumer really just wants your local expertise. They want to know what is going on. Give me the right information or the information that's there. And so I can make the best decisions. And the best agents in our local markets are the ones that I know are presenting information. They're giving options, and then they're detached. If the seller decides it's time to sell, great. If the seller decides it's not time to sell, no problem. If the buyer's ready to buy, they're there for them. If not, it's a few years down the road, they're making sure that they're there for each person in their individual little journey there, not jumping onto the headline, because that's what typically the perception is, that you're just out there trying to get that deal.
Yeah. So if this is what I heard you say, right? You're saying because this news is out there, because people out there in leads are going to see this news, this doesn't make it okay for you to pick up the phone and call people and actually feed into it and say, look, the market's crashing. It's time to sell, time to sell. Don't jump along with the fear to try to scare people into action. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's about trying to figure out what's their goal, and then giving them a real picture of what's happening fact-wise, and leave the predictions out.
Yeah.
Like, because there's nobody is going to be able to predict what's going to happen. Like, nobody's been able to do that. The few people that can raise their hand and say, well, yeah, I predicted this or I predicted that. Well, they might have said it, but it was just timing. They got lucky.
Yeah.
Ask people that have been buying and selling or been in business long enough, you're going to get it wrong. So just stop short of trying to predict what's going to happen. The sellers and the buyers aren't asking you to predict what's going to happen.
Right.
They're asking you for information because you're the local expert. And then they're asking you to, help guide me in this if I choose to do this, but don't try to sway me into doing something because I'm already feeling one certain way. And I can tell you it's a tough thing to do, especially for, I think, probably agents that maybe haven't been through this, where now they're going to be having maybe different conversations. They're going to be getting different questions, and maybe they haven't really been in the market long enough to understand, man, I got to get a little bit better handle on what really is happening. They're as confused as the consumer. Well, one of the things you can do, get educated, form your own opinion on what's going on so you can talk intelligently about it, but stop short of trying to sell people based off of predictions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So I guess it goes back to the same thing that's going to work in this market and the next market, the same thing that works in every single market. It's actually finding out what they want, finding out what their motivation is, finding out what their needs are. It always boils down to that. If you do that, now couple that with actually having good data, knowing exactly what your local market is doing, so you can actually present the full picture to someone instead of just a headline, instead of just saying, okay, well, yes, the market is crashing, present the full picture, and then let the chips fall where they fall. Let them make a decision based on the data that you gave them.
Yeah. These are the times where, instead of looking at a deal, look at the lifetime value of a client. Because when you have that conversation with somebody and you present everything to them and they choose to not move forward with something, then down the road, the fact that you didn't jump on in, the bandwagon and oh my gosh, this is going to happen, you got to go now, then that means a lot. And that makes a big difference to that's who they want their friends and family using.
And you can say the same thing like 6 months ago, right? The agents that were calling up and saying, oh my God, your property value has doubled over the last 6 months. It's time to sell, time to sell. I mean, that kind of be the same thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like for some people right now, in 6 months ago, it was the perfect time to sell.
Yeah.
And it was also the perfect time to buy. Well, how can it be the perfect time to sell and the perfect time for somebody to buy the same property? It's because there's different motivations.
Right. So
if you focus on the client's motivation, then that's the key. It doesn't have anything to do with what you can't predict. Well, now's the time to sell because of this. Well, what if this doesn't happen? That's a tough conversation to have later.
Yeah, there's no predicting. I mean, right now, look, so the interest rates are going up, right? In the short term, they might go up a little bit more, but who's to say that come third quarter or fourth quarter that the economy is in such slowdown or such bad shape that all of a sudden the interest rates start dropping again, right? Because you can't have both. You can't have a recession, going into a recession, and also interest rates rising at the same time, right? They kind of contradict each other. So you don't know what the near future or the long term forecast is going to be. Yeah, so stay away from making predictions.
Yep.
All right. So what's the moral of the story here? Let's summarize everything we talked about.
I think the moral of the story is you have a duty to be educated, be the professional, understand what's happening locally, and then present that without expectation. That's what a great salesperson does.
Yeah.
Is they present the options, they present the facts, knowing that the person on the other end has got to decide what works best for them, and then you perform based off of what they choose to do. And that's it.
Perfect. Nailed it. And know the data, know the numbers. I think now more than ever, you've got to do some research. You've got to dive in and learn the numbers, know exactly what's happening, have a small idea of what's happening on a macro level. Okay, but when it comes to your market, you should know the numbers inside and out. You should have 4 or 5 different data points, talking points that you use in conversations with people. So when they do call you, you actually sound like you know what you're talking about. You sound different than the other agents in the market and actually could dive deep into a conversation about inventory, about number of pendings and all of that stuff. So really get to know the numbers at this point. I think it's going to help you over the next 6 to 12 months having these conversations.
Yeah.
All right, Brendon. Enjoyed it.
All right, man. Glad you're back.
See you next week. Thanks, man.
See you.